listening skills. Now, you've probably heard the saying that teaching does not necessarily entail learning. Think about it for a moment. The teacher might be teaching, but nobody's learning. Nobody's actually listening or learning. So there's a very big difference also between hearing and listening. It's not the same thing. For instance, hearing means that you actually are able with your ears to hear what is going on around you. And after you've heard, you might be able to repeat a fact that you've heard. Somewhere you've heard this fact, and you can. So, no two zebras are alike, the teacher might have said, right? Oh, okay. You can recall that. You heard it. But what does listening entail? It's more than just hearing, it is taking it in and understanding it in your own way. So, you might be thinking, okay, no two zebras are alike. Does it mean that they have unique patterns in their stripes, or what is it? So you are going to take this in and think about it. Does it have to do with the pattern of the stripes? And then you start thinking about it a bit more. And how does this now relate to what this person is actually talking about? Perhaps the uniqueness of human beings or whatever. So you make a judgment about it and you think to yourself, well, maybe it works like the color of a human being's iris, because no two irises are exactly the same color. They don't look the same. And also, human fingerprints are all different. So maybe it's the same for the zebras, that their stripes actually are sort of their identity marks, if you like. But you've engaged with the information. And it is very important to improve your listening skills. As I said, as opposed to just hearing, most of us can hear quite well, but your listening skills must be honed. Effective listening, then, is a skill that is very often and frequently, therefore, undervalued. It's undervalued. People don't think that's important. Oh, teach the person how to write and so forth. That's important. But listening properly is very important. Can you see how it works hand in hand with understanding, with evaluating, with judging? So good communication skills require both effective speaking and listening techniques, right? And it is, in fact, uh, true that attentive listening, if you learn to listen to people really instead of constantly interrupting them and really listening to what they have to say, it can go a long way towards forging human relationships or improving them. So it's a very good thing to start working on your listening skills. Very simple things that you might even have thought about before, but let us just go through some of them. Somebody's giving a speech or a teacher's teaching. Um, Very important is to face the speaker, because if you face the speaker, you can see the person's face, the person's body language. You can look at much more carefully, what his feelings are and how he's trying to get that across, his body language, etc. So face the speaker and give the speaker your undivided attention. In other words, really listen. And then while you're listening, don't sit there and judge everything the person is saying or mentally criticize what he's saying. Take it in, think about it, but don't sit there and criticize, because the moment you start criticizing what that person is saying, you are really not listening. And he's perhaps making a very valid point while you are doing this. So let the speaker just finish with his or her point. Please let the person say what he or she wants to say, and apply active listening skills. Become active in this process. That doesn't mean that you must put your hand up every 5 minutes or shout something out, interrupt the person all the time. That's not what I mean. You must be active. You interact, for instance, by nodding, by smiling, by laughing if it's funny, but that you don't interrupt the person. Okay, don't interrupt, but be there, interact with what the person is saying. As I said, there might be a measure of criticism there, but make sure that you know what you're criticizing and that you're doing the right thing there. So also be attentive, be relaxed. Don't sit there and fiddle around being nervous, because that means that you're thinking of something that you have to do after this, or a phone call that you need to make. And don't get distracted then by your own thoughts and feelings. The whole idea then is to really listen with attention and be an active participant in the situation by showing the person that you are listening, nodding, for instance, and then interacting with the text the person is doing. Now, there are a few active listening skills that you can perhaps, and I've shortened them so that you can just try and remember it. I said be attentive. The first thing, pay attention. Give the non-verbal affirmations. In other words, don't sit there. I have seen people sitting and listening at somebody and they're nodding all the time, but I know that this person is not even listening. So be careful. Really non-verbally affirm. If you nod, it means that you really agree, or smile if you think it's funny, or whatever. But give affirmations. Look how this girl is responding. She's giving an affirmation. The speaker now knows that what he or she said made an impact. Even the boy is sort of smiling. There's a non-verbal affirmation that the person is really paying attention, right? Ask probing questions and open-ended questions. Um, Request, if you like, clarification, but in the right place. Don't interrupt the person. If it's time for questions, request clarification on a certain point, something that you didn't quite understand, or that didn't add up to you, or that sounded contradictory or something. Also, sit there and do what this guy is doing. He's taking notes, he's summarizing, he's paraphrasing perhaps, but he's also interacting by writing. Remember, we said listening, speaking, writing, it's all one process. And also reflect your feelings there where you are writing, or reflect your feelings in how you are responding with a smile also. So, and also be attuned to the speaker's feelings. In other words, really be there. Be attentive. Like I said, that's very important. You must give your full attention when you listen to a lecture, just a lesson from a teacher, or a speech, or when there is a discussion. And if you have a hard time doing that, if you constantly find that your mind is wandering, or you tend to just go into another zone while the person is talking, the voice is droning, but you're not really listening, also you're not really hearing. So, in the process of giving your full attention, you have to sometimes concentrate on doing that. Don't look around. Don't look at the window and see a little birdie, or you see something happening there, somebody walks past, and you're constantly distracted by something. Concentrate to ignore that and focus on what you see in front of you. Keep your mind focused, okay? Take the information in and don't interrupt, because the moment you interrupt the speaker, when the speaker hasn't finished a point, you're also irritating the other people who are trying to get the point from the speaker. Now you're interrupting because you think you're such a smart ass. So don't do that. Don't interrupt, and give your full attention and concentrate on it. If somebody's irritating you because the person is chewing gum or doing something that you don't like, just try to mentally switch off and focus. Um, as you are listening, listen for main ideas and also supporting ideas. And here you can also, in your own mind, ask yourself whether these ideas really support the main idea. As I said, you interact, but you don't constantly criticize. You just ask yourself first, what exactly is this person saying? Also, listen for presentation pointers. You will be taught when you make a prepared speech to use connectives, for instance. So after having made one point, or after you've made the point, say my point is, and then you repeat the point perhaps in a paraphrased form. The fact that you said my point is, you get the audience attention immediately. So you also need to go and listen. If the person says my point is, or as a matter of fact, or in reality, in fact, or however, therefore, they use those words. Ask whether you can see the connection. Okay. Also look for change in posture. Um, it's not really a good idea, as if you are giving a speech, to change your posture all the time. You should actually be standing still with a loose um, top body, but feet cemented into the ground. But sometimes it is effective if after a huge point, or let's say you have two major points, after the one major point, you have a long pause, that you just make a slight change in posture, just to show that you are moving to a next major area of your argument. So if watch out for things like that. So if a person's giving a speech and he's made a big point, and he sort of just looks this way or turns around and then starts again, take note of it, because it means that he's going on to a next major point. So look for also change in pace. If the person is speaking fast and moving towards a certain word, and then he shouts out that word, or he really emphasizes that word, it can be very effective, because he sort of races towards that word, which is actually the essence of what he's trying to say. So listen for things like that. Those are techniques that you also learn when you are giving a speech yourself. So furthermore, interpret, as I said, interpret what you have heard, think about it, and then don't be shy to ask those questions or to give the feedback by nodding, by frowning, perhaps, by laughing, or just by being silent. That also says something, right? And evaluate and think of a response if you are asked to ask questions later, usually towards the end. So you also need to know the listening process. Um, Teaching the oral skills in school is very focused on the process of listening. Listening instruction, in other words, now we get closer to tasks and so on, usually involves three elements of listening. There will usually be a pre-listening phase. If, for instance, your teacher is going to read a certain novel to you, and the novel is all about, say, global warming, the teacher might have a preparatory lesson before that, when she actually speaks to you about global warming. Get your opinions about global warming, get you to talk about it, get information, and just have something casual. So it just gets you into that mindset of, where do I stand exactly? Do I know what it's all about? And she might give you something to go and do research on before she starts writing the actual novel, where the major theme might be global warming. So there are some pre-listening exercises that you're often given in the exercises of involving oral communication in a class. in a listening comprehension. Also, you will be given a little bit of information about the subject in case you have no idea what the subject is all about. It will just give you a guideline and perhaps get you to go and look it up and think about it before you get to school the next day when the person is now going to do the listening comprehension. And she has told you that basically the topic is more or less this. So you will know. You're not going to have the text, but you can have some ideas before you start. So there's pre-listening. And then, of course, the listening is the actual listening process where you sit and do the active listening, you know what I'm saying, focusing, concentrating, etc., doing all that, smiling, and being part of the listening process. Think, for instance, when this teacher is reading the story, how you're going to laugh in a certain place, or she may make a little joke about something in the book, or something might just sound funny and everybody laughs or makes a comment about it. There are listening techniques as well, where there's a listening period while you are listening. And then, of course, post-listening will usually entail you're answering questions on certain chapters of a novel, or you're answering questions on the passage for the listening comprehension. But not every step is used on every occasion, but basically this is the listening process. For instance, here, when you're listening to a recorded explanation of something or a teacher explaining something, the pre-listening activities will alert you to the need for focused listening. Can you see? It'll just put you in the right frame of thinking. And it'll give you the background, the frame of reference. And it will help with your associations, with your own experiences as well. The topic to self, in other words, how does the topic relate to me and I relate to the topic, etc. How does it affect my life? And then that's pre-listening, and the listening activities will help you to recall the details. Remember, I said while you're listening, you are not going to say the zebra, has stripes that are unique to him. You're also going to think, perhaps it works like the human eye, etc. So you are going to become involved, and you will recall details and interpret and evaluate while you are reading. Post-reading listening might involve responses and discussion. That very often happens with the oral moderation, because although the oral exercises are all done in class by the teacher, right? And I remember I told you that they're set in stone, it's 50 marks. They do get externally moderated. Okay, so a facilitator might come there and ask you questions, have you read to them, have you do the prepared speech, might have you do the listening comprehension, and she will verify that the marks that the teacher gave are actually spot on, or if in general it's way too high, it's just not right, she might bring down the marks, right? So therefore, post listening exercises, in other words, after you've listened to all of the external moderators' talks and discussions or whatever, you must be able to perhaps discuss, give your responses. So that's always there's a post-listening. Sometimes it's in writing, often. So there are also kinds of listening. It sounds very technical, but just listen to it, because you need to realize this and keep it in mind as you're listening. Sometimes you listen for special information, right? While you are listening to the listening comprehension, the text, there might be dates, names of the husband, year of death or something. You're going to jot down those, because that's in the second listening, those because they are special in things that you don't have to reason through. It's just information that's there. So that you remember, say it was 1954 and it was for 6 months and he was with his brother Reginald. Do you understand? Something like that. So you sometimes listen for special information, but you also listen to critically analyze when there are facts and opinions in the passage and you are analyzing it and so on. So you're also going to listen to tone, how the teacher, or sometimes it's a teacher reading or it's a recorded thing, somebody else reading. Look at the tone. Why is the teacher sort of raising her voice here slightly? Look at the pace. Why is she saying that is the point? Why is she doing that? Because she wants to make very sure that the audience understands or that the reader understands that that is the point. So she might emphasize every single word. So listen to that, the pace, the language use, whether it's colloquial, perhaps something that might make you laugh or something. Respond to style. Look at things like rhetorical questions, etc. Tone, register. Look at the logical sequence of the information. Make judgments, provide evidence, make assumptions, predict consequences. Respond to language use. Is this effective, etc.? Is the choice of this certain word effective in the context? Format, why is there one paragraph that sort of stands alone and it's read like that? It's just that one line being emphasized. And listen to the pronunciation of the words, etc. All of those things. You listen for critical analyses. In other words, you're interacting with information. And also you listen for appreciation, interaction, especially in debates, for instance, in small group discussions, in structured discussions. And you also, as you are doing that, you must always be aware of culture and aesthetic qualities, and that you consider those things while you're listening and thinking of how you're going to respond so that you don't tread on anybody's toes, which you can easily do. Look at the aesthetic qualities of the oral text. For instance, rhythm. If the text is read in a very rhythmic way and the pace is now slow, then fast, ask yourself, how pretty does that sound? Is it effective aesthetically? So please, it's important that you practice active listening in class, at university, with your lectures, etc. Wherever you have to listen, make sure that you become an involved and active listener and hone your skills, because it is totally worth it.